This is Carla from MindPlore with Carla and Friends. And guess what? We are here to talk about transformation. And if you don't realize or not, we are all transforming. We just need to decide how we want to transform because either we can keep our thoughts in a positive vein or in a negative vein. I prefer positive, and I'm still working on doing that. In any case, I have Jeannie back, who you guys already know pretty well, and I have a master pianist here, world renowned Ingolf Wonder, and he's always very, very interesting to listen to. So, Jeannie, why don't you get it started? And I
Okay.
did not use the quote.
Well, we've had some really good conversations lately on manifestation and the power of thought. And this time we're talking about transformation. And a quote that I found that I think is really telling is transformation isn't about improving, it's about rethinking. And that comes from Malcolm Gladwell. And I think that the whole idea that I've read several times over the last couple of days is that transformation is a journey. And the idea is that the final destination isn't well defined, that we get to choose it. And that's a very interesting thing. Um, it's the journey, and we should be enjoying the journey, with the idea that at the outcome we become who we really are. So there's a bit of uh, definition coming through the transformation, but lessons to be learned on the journey. And I think that's why it's really not about improving, it's about rethinking, because you're redefining yourself and you're redefining what your goals and your values are constantly. Values tend to be a constant, but every once in a while you need to take a look at them. Ingolf, you're into sound and music. How does sound help us in transformation? Because I know it's extremely powerful.
Well, I mean, absolutely, because we are frequency. If you go into the cell, it's a wave, and everything we respond to sounds probably much quicker and more intense than to almost anything else. And that's why, for example, when you have a 100-meter race, they don't show you a flash to start, but they shoot the gun, because your hearing system, or the how do you say, information goes quicker to your brain. So, and also the first thing a newborn does to communicate with the mother, it's via sound waves. And so it's, people are sometimes not aware of how much also music, for example, influences their bodies and their systems, even if they're not aware of it. Because only if you train your brain to detect certain patterns in music, if you get more sensitive, then you get conscious of this. But even if you're not conscious of this, your subconscious still takes the music in. And look at the world that we are surrounding ourselves with. It's very low quality, not only music, but I would almost call it sounds. And you're constantly bombarded with the sounds without you noticing, or only the sensitive ones notice. And but yet this makes your transformation also. All the input that you give your brain is directly put into your protein creation the next day, and hence we constantly transform.
Interesting. Maybe that's why when I see a bunch of folks from an urban area, a big city, they have a certain look, and I think, oh yeah, they're from the city. It used to be like, I live outside of San Francisco, and I live in an area that gets really hot, so suntan is normal. And then I would go into the city, and everybody would be just a bit pasty white because, while I'm burning up out in the valleys, they're being engulfed in Carl the fog. And yeah, somebody named the fog Carl, as in Carl Sagan, but the fog rolls in and you don't get as much sun. And so I noticed when I was younger that people from the city seemed to have this kind of pasty white look. But then when I went and worked in the city, I was bombarded by all the city noise. There's a music to the city, as you said, to the noise.
Absolutely.
There's a music to it. There's the honking horns. There's the people yelling at each other. There's the constant movement, even just paper crunching because people are stepping on it. There's things that you don't hear when you're in a smaller town. And I do recall thinking that we kind of segregate. We pick places to live. We pick places to work, and all of that influences us. So when I go to New York City, I feel this energy that's frenetic is probably the best word. And I end up feeling like I'm like this because that's not my usual state. And then I'm punching. I found the first time I was punching the elevator, like go, go, go. And when I got on the airplane to leave, I went because the energy was different. The next town wasn't quite that frenetic. And I don't say that I'm sensitive to that, but I have grown over the years to pay attention to energy like that. And that's made me a little bit more resilient to chaos, I think. Mm-hmm. I've transformed in my old years.
Well, there are so many influences in a city like New York City. There's not only the sound that makes it, of course, it's many layers, but the sound is something we, or normal people, let's call it this way, these days are not into music on a high level, because I'm not talking about quality only, but on a high sensitivity level, because there are many professional musicians that are not sensitive at all in hearing. You don't, this kind of sensitivity you don't need necessarily to make music. You need it to make great music, but not all musicians are sensitive. That's my point. But if you're sensitive to these kind of things, then you see absolutely, because people get, the human is very adaptive. So people, if you live in a certain environment, you get used to it. It's very simple. But you live with the consequences, good or bad, from the area you live in. So definitely, sound is something people should take more care of, because the simple fact is you can't close your ears. You can close your eyes. You cannot close your ears, because probably security reasons in the jungle or something, you have to, even if you're sleeping, you have to be aware when the predator is coming. But definitely we live with this. So it's constantly streaming in, and I'm amazed sometimes. I mean, I travel a lot. I travel almost 7 months a year. So I'm often in big cities, but I enjoy the countryside also because of this. You have this beauty of silence. You hear then so many things in nothing. This is amazing. I mean, then of course there are many layers as well. The imagination is amazing that we have, but yes, but that's my message.
Yeah, when we're allowed to use our imagination, I think that with a lot of the chaotic energy that I feel, whether I'm in a city or with a group of people that's somewhat chaos, I don't feel like I can be creative. But when I get into the silence, I get that spark of an idea. And I use music, to be honest with you. I have a focus issue I've had all my life. My favorite line in the movie Up is when the dog is interacting with the old man, and then he goes, squirrel. That's the shiny object thing gets me all the time, especially when it comes to technology, because it takes your focus away. But I turn on soft jazz, and I can focus and do something over time that I was procrastinating about. know, and I know one of my old bosses would go, I come into your office and I want to go to sleep. And I would say, well, then sit down and go to sleep, because I'm not changing the music. You want me to write this document that's going to be 40 pages long and you need it to by tomorrow? I need to focus. You know, and he'd say, how does this make you focus? And I go, sit down, just listen. But I'm not a scientist. I like to play one every once in a while, but I'm not a scientist. But watching, and people who've listened to me know I learned a lot from my son, but watching my son get so engrossed in video games and in cartoons when he was younger, he was so engrossed that it would be like he was one with the TV. I could not get his attention away. He's 7 years old. I'm yelling his name, trying to get him ready for school. And he's so into that television that he's not even hearing me. I have to get up close to him. And I found I had to turn off the TV. And he was diagnosed hyperactive, like not somebody saying, I think your son is hyperactive. He was literally diagnosed with that issue. And so I started thinking, the TV has certain waves, both visual and audio. Just it goes like this, and it's an even wave. And I could just see his brain waves cluing into that. And he would calm down and he'd watch TV, and everything else would be out. He couldn't hear it, he couldn't see it. So I started paying attention to things like sound and visual cues, because I needed to figure out ways to get him to focus. And so from there, I jumped to, oh, I need music. So it's wonderful. It's a way that we can control a little bit of the chaos, I think. But to get back to transformation, that's also probably part of the rethinking. I didn't see things like him watching TV as a problem. Then I saw it as a way for him to control his crazy thinking issues. And then we were able to watch things that I thought were better for him than, 24 hours of video games. I'd give him time for video games, and then we would watch things on TV where he would learn something, and then we would have teaching moments. And he thought it was boring, but by the end of it, he would have enjoyed it. So I rethought how to discipline him and gave him a different way of looking at television at that time. Carla, how does that sound with you, with sound and visual cues and
It's
getting us to
funny.
rethink?
Interesting point. Someone was talking to me today because, I do a lot of things in getting the show open. And she said to me, Carla, do you know that you join in with the talking, and sometimes you don't even realize if you're on the topic or not? And I'm like, that's possible because I have everything else going on, but I do react to the sounds I hear. And if it's the last 2 or 3 words and I don't think that belongs there, I jump in, whether I should or I shouldn't, because I haven't been listening as closely. So I think words help that transformation, or maybe not help at times in my case, but it has an effect on the transformation that we have every moment of the day, because we hear sounds and there we are, we pop into it because we heard a word we were hoping to hear but had not heard yet. If that makes any sense. Now, I've been paying attention to this conversation.
But what you're saying is the effect of governance. When you're facilitating a conversation, which is what you do every Tuesday and Thursday with MindPlore, you facilitate great conversations. Then when it's going a little off kilter, you jump in and pull us back. In the work world, we would say, now getting back to the agenda, which is a polite way of saying you've gone off on a tangent now, and gets us back. But that's exactly what you do.
But however, tangents are a part of life. I don't know if I know anyone who stays on the topic that they're supposed to stay on for more than 2 to 3 minutes these days, unless they're actually talking on that topic and expected to talk for a longer period of time. I know I don't. I could be talking to someone and I'll remember something and oh, do you remember we were talking about X, Y, and Z? And they'll come back to me and say, but we're talking about ABC right now. Get back to ABC. And it happens all the time. And sound tends to get me more so than anything else. However, I have to admit, if I see the dog or cat doing something cute, I'll go to that and I'll laugh. So I think we all have a way of being distracted very easily in golf.
Yeah, most likely, because it's everything is going to chaos, right? I mean, like if you go into the forest, this is or into a microorganism, it's like it's the perfect order. Like you have the particles that are in order. That's why it's feeling calm, it's feeling good. And so if you want to focus, if you have got some, if you have to get some work done or something, you need to basically take the chaos and put some order in. So this takes effort. So when you don't do that, stuff is going, it's entropy, right? So stuff is going away. And yeah, this is absolutely a part that one has to keep, I think, keep oneself under control, keep the thoughts under control, because as we said, we transform every day. Billions of cells die, you create new ones, and these new ones are created with, if you are interested in the topic of epigenetics, I encourage everybody to read into that. All our personal realities, or whatever we think, whatever we hear, whatever we see, all of that, whatever we, let's say, imagine, influences our cell creation. So basically, you have, which is beautiful, because you have the chance to change every single day biologically, and people are not aware of that. So
would that be why we sing to plants?
Excuse me?
Would that be why we sing to plants?
Maybe, I don't know. I think that the systems, our own body, or the universe is so it's so vast. No one mind can understand it. So we don't know why we're doing things. We are reacting. Our subconscious is doing things we don't understand sometimes, and it most of the time has a reason to do something. So
I love that, the idea of epigenetics and the thoughts that we have and the sounds that we expose ourselves to help influence the new cells that we're making every day.
No, I mean, this is a fact. Many people don't know about it, but it's a fact. It's not fiction. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and that kind of plays with what Deepak Chopra was talking about when he was explaining quantum physics and the speed of bosons and quarks being equal to the speed of thought, and that we're not aware of 80 to 90% of our thoughts. So we really need to focus a little bit on what we're thinking, because the thoughts go so fast. So even Carla, with what you just said, when you said sometimes I pay attention or I go off in tangents, but I don't know, that was a little bit of self-deprecation. But that's one of the things that folks that are the expert in communication between male and female will tell us that women tend to do that self-deprecating thing at the end, which devalues to ourselves the who we are. And that's sometimes part of that whole live or die kind of background from our history, when we had to depend on the strong man to save us because we were the gatherers. But in today's market, in today's world, we need the strength that women can bring. But if we keep self-deprecating, we don't allow ourselves to be that way. And I've become very attuned to it after listening to a few speakers, because I'm the first one to go, oh, this whole thing, yeah, and not take a compliment or not allow myself to step forward except for here, of course, because you give me a great safe place to do that. But I've become aware of it because in this time, in this space, we all have to step up a little, because we're in that chaos that, Ingolf, you mentioned. We are in that chaos as a society. I don't know if there's any country that's not in chaos right now. And just from COVID alone, we're in a survival mode that I've never recognized in my 30 plus years. There you go. That's a way. So I can really keep them young. In our maturity, we've lived through. I mean, I was young during the end of the Vietnam War, which was chaotic here in the United States. Probably more chaotic in Vietnam, but in the United States, there was a lot of unrest at the time. The 70s were just continually transforming, although I still hold that it has the best music, for a decade. The 80s were kind of crazy economically. I mean, we had the highest inflation ever. And I know a lot of the folks that I talk to don't even know what inflation is. And I say, be thankful. So we've had this continual churning and chaos. But right now, it seems like it's the highest level ever. And if we don't step up and say, it's okay, calm down. We all have ideas. Let's listen. We're not going to hear the pearl, that one pearl. There's going to be a pearl that's going to make everything just go and calm down. But we don't know who's going to have it.
Well, the stress is absolutely detrimental, because if you have a heart transplant or any organ transplant for that matter, they give the patient stress hormones so that the nervous system does not reject the new organ. So it means stress hormones they switch off our systems that heal us. And so if you live too long with stress hormones and you don't have any time to get rid of them, it's absolutely unhealthy. And I don't know how that would, we will see in the next 5-10 years, we will see the results of this COVID time. But it's amazing how much stress the media is making, and people live in fear all the time. And this is absolutely wrong.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. We've never had to shut down the world the way we've had with this pandemic. And it's made me think about things differently. You can't walk through life without considering consequences, because right now the consequences are life and death. And that's going to transform us into a new reality, I believe. I mean, I won't fight with masks. I'll put a mask on because that's a life or death decision. Many people don't see it that way, but I do.
Yeah, well, that's totally fine. Everybody, I think, should see it in their personal reality as it makes them feel safe. This is the most important thing, because we have the unique ability of all animals that we can lie to ourselves, and this is a good thing, because the brain doesn't distinguish reality that is out there and the reality that you make up with your thoughts. And this is why we can change, because we can make the brain believe something that isn't out there, and then it's created because you believed it first. So it's very important that people feel safe and secure, and this is not what's happening. And people also don't forget, and in the media it's not mentioned at all, how important the immune system is. And this is what I was just saying. When you live with stress hormones, your immune system is simply shut down, because you had stress in the past because you were fleeing from the tiger that was attacking you. And then the stress hormones are good because it makes you agile, react quick, run away or hide better or whatever. But it's not designed to be to be in the stress situation for a longer period of time. You always have to relax after such a stress situation, and we are not given the time to relax in this world, because we're constantly bombarded by media, by information that some do it consciously, some not. I live without television, for example, because it's absolutely unhealthy. So
Well, yeah, I know. Digitally, we get 34 gigabytes of information thrown at us. It's not necessarily something that we want. And I did some fun calculations and realized that that's about 100,000 words a day, or the equivalent of a Stephen King novel, and 7 hours of video. So there's no way that we could consume that much information. So we have to have really Herculean focus factors to figure out what do you need to know and what do you want to know and what can you throw away.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll find ways to do that a little bit easier. But it's not easy because we also have that fear of missing out. Was it FOMO? FOMO, fear of missing out. Like we got to know the best TikTok, don't we? And we have to know what to do with cinnamon and do that. And that's crazy. I remember my mother saying, if Becky told you to jump in the lake, would you jump in the lake? And I'm thinking, part of me as a kid, it's like, yeah, but I didn't know how to swim, so that was a dangerous thing. But what she was trying to tell me was I wasn't allowing myself the power to make a choice. I was giving it to somebody else. And I'm not sure if that's something that's paid attention to anymore, the power that we have to choose.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
sorry to jump in, but in order to choose the information that is relevant to you, the most important thing is that you have a goal, that you have a mission or something that you want to achieve, because only this way you can say, all right, this is important, that's not important, this may be important, that not at all. But if you don't have this higher goal, then you lost. You just go with the flow wherever it leads you, and this is usually controlled by somebody else.
Yeah, that's true. Carla, you were going to jump in?
Yeah, thank you. But by going with the flow, and I tend to do that more now than I did before, we are sometimes restricted. It may seem like we're going in the right direction, and then all of a sudden it's like, why did I do that? And we want to turn around. And the point is, I want to ask you guys, in order for a transformation to happen, once we have gone with the flow and we hit a rock for a moment and then we keep going, should we turn around or should we keep moving forward? What will bring up the most valuable transformation?
Ingolf, you first.
I was trying not to do that, but thank you.
Well, I mean, there are many schools. I mean, some say we live in a simulation, and we don't have some power anyway to just rather sail through wherever it leads you. And of course, you can't. Whatever is out there, whatever controls us or not, or if it's by pure coincidence, everything, whatever it is, it has more power than the individual, most likely. And so at some point you have to sail. I mean, you have to be smart, right? But I think what I meant with mission, or with whatever you want to, basically it's what makes you happy, what keeps you in balance, what is worth going through, storms or going through high waves. If you have such a thing, for whatever it is for you, then I think you will, when you say something stops you, and then it's a decision whether you turn around or not. I think turning around is anyway not an option. You just take different ways to wherever you want to go. And if you don't know where you want to go, okay, well, then it's probably maybe the universe telling you that you should think about where you want to go in the first place, at least roughly. You don't have, nobody's reaching exactly the goal that you envision. And this is good, I think, because it leads you to places where you never thought you would go. But you have to have a certain mission or goal in mind. This is how I, until now, maybe in 20 years, I will think I'm really different, but this is how I think now.
Now, if that's true, what is propelling us to transform into the best version of ourselves?
I think if you look at those moments where you stumble on the road, as you said, you know, and going to what I read about Malcolm Gladwell, it's not about improving, it's about rethinking. Every time you stumble on the road, there's a lesson. And I like to think about, in fact, my poor son, if he ever heard this, he'd be mad at me because he doesn't like me telling stories. But the thing when he would blow it and have a problem, I would say, what lesson did you learn? And I used that in my management when I had a team. I would say, what lesson did we learn? Because that redefines our next goal, our next aspiration. So when you have that obstacle, you get to choose, do I go around it? Do I go through it? Or do I ignore it? And in that learning the lesson, you figure out which action to make. And that's the choice you make. So for example, many years ago in my early career, I had a supervisor who was relatively naive. And she made the statement, very, very definitive statement, you cannot write. And writing it was an important part of my career. I got A's in school for my writing. You know, so I thought I was a good writer. So this stopped me, literally stopped me. And my choice was, do I give up, walk away, go on to another career? Or do I figure out what's the issue and move through it? Or do I just shut down? So I chose to talk to a friend of mine that was a writing coach. And she said, send me your original draft and send me the draft she marked up. And she came back to me and she said, what we have here is a style difference. Simple. That's it. It's a style difference. And she doesn't know the difference between your style is journalistic because you were trained as a journalist, and her style is more what she called more brain just stopped there. She called it more of a feature, you know, so it wasn't as hard hitting for news. And I'm in PR, and hard hitting news was what we were working towards. So my choice then was, do I change to her style, or do I modify my style, or do I stay with my style? And I chose to modify it so I could get through working with that woman. I learned a very big lesson that I wasn't ready for. And that's that not everybody recognizes the same styles, and that's okay. Because that's what my friend said. It's okay, you write well, but it's a different style. So you need to write to appease her in a way, but make sure that your client gets what they need. So that was a huge, huge moment for me in my career. You know, I'm a published author, so I'd like to think that I can write well, but I periodically go back to, oh my God, I hear this woman's voice in the back of my head saying, you can't write. And I have to then rethink what's going on, because obviously I need to learn something. And that's my ego voice, I think, trying to protect me from making a mistake. And yet it could stop me from moving forward. So there's lots of lessons that we can learn as we go through the transformation. And that's why I brought up the Malcolm Gladwell thing, because I really like the idea of rethinking it. You know, when somebody says you can't, it's time to go, okay, why? What is it about what you see that doesn't work for you? And what is it that I see that seems to work, but we have a clash? Oftentimes we're seeing the same thing, but we're using different words, or we're interpreting it a little bit different. But that's how I go through an obstacle. I try to figure it out rather than just walk away, because there's a reason an obstacle's in front of me. Sometimes it's simply, Carla, that in fact, I think it's called a limiting belief. Sometimes it's simply a thought in my head that stops me cold because I'm afraid to move forward. I'm afraid to step out of comfort. And, comfort is great. But in this day and age, we need to be a little bit more uncomfortable because we have to make some drastic changes. And by drastic changes, it's drastic to us personally, because I think as a species, we need to change. But I can only change one person, and that's me. I can only change how I react or respond to the world, right? So I have to figure out how I'm going to respond. Ingolf, you clearly have something.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, like everybody can only influence his own personal reality, but if you believe that particles are entangled and that we are basically all one, then the changes you make changes some other place, wherever that place is, in this world, in another dimension, or whatever out there is. I don't claim that I know. But I think we have more power than we think over the world in a way. But I know, there's so many destructive thoughts out there, and since the media sells better when there are negative news, or generally people are more controllable with fear and all of these things, it just is a logic thing that we are confronted with all these, and with all this negativity, with all these thoughts that are destructive, because people at the end of the day want to control other people, or there are maybe not many people, but there are some bad people out there that just want to, just as in which movie was that, when is it, they are just people who want to see the world burn or something like this, I don't remember, but there are such people out there, and sometimes they are in high places, and that leaves us in the world that we are. So we have to change, but everybody has to change for himself first, for his own personal reality. And I think that goes then pretty quickly, because we all are influenced by frequencies or waves that come from somewhere, probably from the cosmos. Like like climate changes when the route of Earth changes around the sun, then we are constantly in there are constantly different waves coming from the universe, and we are all influenced by that without knowing. That's why there are things that can prove let's say align crises, wars, these kind of things with like patterns that they found in 450,000 years of ice rings. So there is something out there we don't understand. So but I think everything is connected. And however you call it, if you go into religion or into whatever mysticism, they come to the sort of same conclusion. They just use different words for it. And that's why I think we can change the world, but one person at a time. But I think it goes quite quickly afterwards.
Well, that's the whole point. It is one person at a time. And yet people don't realize, although it is one person at a time, it is what they are thinking. I have people who come in daily and say, I cannot speak English. I want to speak English. I'm not making fun of you guys. I'm just bringing up this point. And I look at them, and I used to say, and I still do, if you say you cannot do something, you can't do it. It'll never happen. You need to change that not. Take it out of your vocabulary. But in doing this, a lot of people have problems with it. So how would it be easier for me to help them realize that it's what they are telling themselves, not someone else, not their brothers or sisters or mom or dad. It's what you have decided yourself you want to be, instead of transforming fully to that flower.
Of course, but you create your own reality, meaning you say you can't do something, to yourself. But that's a product of all the experiences of everything that you've ever heard, because the subconscious doesn't forget much. The conscious mind forgets things, but it's stored somewhere here. And that's why it's so important to transform the way you want. It's so important to control your thoughts, to control your environment. This is like if you want to lose weight, we most of the time just put the junk food somewhere out of our reach, so that we, even if we feel like eating bad stuff, we can't even get to it. So we basically condition ourselves by just making it hard to get. Because it's just addiction. This happens with the negative thoughts are more addictive chemically than positive thoughts. So we need to work harder for the positive thoughts to stick. So at the end of the day, it's hard work. So, but our thoughts are most important, as Jeannie said. It's about rethinking. I mean, this quote is great. It's it all starts with the thought.
Yeah, I found the difference between affirmation and affirmation useful, Carla. Affirmations we've heard, it's repeating over and over something good. I am prosperous, I am intelligent, I am smart, I can do whatever I want. You have a list of things that you repeat 9, 10, a dozen times throughout the day. The affirmation puts it in the form of a question, because this is in Noah St. John's book. He's the first person I knew to talk about this. When you say, I am prosperous, the first thing your brain says is, no, you're not. What makes you think that? And those are the thoughts that we don't always pay attention to, but it comes right up. And so the idea of affirmation is to keep repeating, so that quiets it down. But when you do the affirmation, you say, isn't it wonderful how prosperous I've become? And your brain says yes. And that also reminds me of a philosopher I was listening to who said the universe can only say yes. So if you say, I can't speak English, the universe says yes. If you say, I can't speak English, the universe says yes. So I love the idea of affirmations, where you put it in the form of a question and you retrain your brain to pop up more positive responses. I try it every once in a while and I'm amazed. I worry about money and I say, isn't it great how money just flows to me? And it takes a minute, takes a week, but something happens and I've taken care of whatever that money issue is. And I should do this more often so that I can say, isn't it great how prosperous I am all the time? But it's a play on that old saw, be careful what you wish for. If the universe can only say yes, you have to think about what you're putting out in the universe. And it wasn't until this philosophy person said that affirmations actually popped up and why they work. Because if it only says yes, it only says yes to anything. It has no judgment, whether it's good or bad. That's your judgment. There are some people who are dirt poor, who are the happiest people I've ever met. And there are some people who are extremely rich, who have nothing in their life to make them happy. So it depends on what you really want in life and how you define prosperity. So those are things that go into our mind, and how we rethink them, how we help our mind rethink them, because remember, there's 80,000 thoughts we can't hear, we don't pay attention to, and I'm trying constantly to bring them up in my own mind, because I want to stop them from stopping me. And the only way to do that is to pay attention and become conscious. It happens a lot when I'm meditating. And I want to say something, Ingolf, because you are the great pianist. The idea of adding sound is important to my meditation because it lets me relax. And I remember working with somebody once where he measured the tones in my voice, and he said I was missing, I think it was F sharp and A flat. So he mixed a sound of those two and played it for 10 minutes. And there were muscles in the back of my neck that I didn't know I had. And my head went boom all the way down. And when it was done, I was like, can we do that for 10 more minutes? It was amazing. The after doing that, that's when I added soft jazz and piano music to my meditation, because it helps me let loose and focus at the same time.
Now, I'm not surprised, because this is exactly what you feel that it's true. I mean, like, I know it's true from a scientific point of view, but if you look, music does that to you, and it's clear. There was even I have friends in sound healing also, and it's quite some people even say you can heal almost everything if you hit the right frequency. Like, you can bring the systems in order with frequency. And I know that you have a big enemy if you say that, with the pharma industry, who wants to sell you all the drugs, but but there is something to it.
In the space-time continuum, they've only been here this much,
Yeah.
and we've found ways to survive for thousands upon thousands of years before they even were around. So, and that's part of the balance, I think, that we all need, is who wins and who loses is not the equation we should go with. It's what works.
That's
I
right.
have no problem saying I could use a massage versus taking, a Valium. We all have to find things that work for us. And
That's
yes,
right.
we've allowed money and logic, I think, to rule the day. I mean, I'm from the corporate world, and I know that my left brain is like, which hand am I looking? My left brain is much stronger than my right brain, because that's what I was trained to use. And yet, when I can meditate and let loose, I get really creative. And figuring out how to be creative in this world is not the easiest thing. So my hat's off to you for being able to do that. I was kind of driven into I would say a workflow that wasn't necessarily fit with my right brain. I was successful, but if I could balance the two, I would have been more happy.
But
Do
you
you
can
agree with
still
that?
be. But you can still be, because you
Well,
can
yeah,
transform.
Well, I will tell you, my little brother, who's not so little anymore, showed me something. He's a jazz singer, and he found a way to continue his art while he found a job that supported it. So in the early years, when he was auditioning for things, the job he had would give him time off to go audition. And then as he got into a rhythm, he told me, this is my vocation, my job. My singing is my avocation that keeps me alive. And I was like, we went to the same schools. Where did you learn that? I learned from my little brother that you can have both. And so I do my best to have art in my life.
Well, life's so complex. As I said, our systems are so complex that there's no one rule for everybody, and it's beautiful. It just, everybody has to find their own way. And
I like to say there are 7 billion people in the world. That means there are 7 billion opinions, and we need to respect each and every one.
And that's sort of the reason for MindPlore, because of that, the diversity, but we all have one thing in common, and that's the breath we breathe. And as long as we're going in and out every day and inhaling and exhaling, we are alive and we are on this earth. So I often wonder, why is this such a problem for people to accept, to transform, not just for who you are and not Jeannie? I don't want to be Jeannie. No offense, Jeannie. I don't want to be in golf. I want to be me. And me cannot exactly be like Jeannie in golf or anyone else in the world. So does transformation mean transforming our own lives? Or does it mean transforming ourselves in order to see what the world is really about? In golf?
Oh, that's very deep. um, well, I mean, the science is now, I mean, maybe not a mainstream science, but they're now discovering that things are not as they are or as they were taught. So meaning Darwin's theory and all of these things, this is now starting to be debunked in a way that we that basically it's not about the survival of the fittest, like basically the fittest or the strongest kills everybody else, but it's about cooperation, and the whole world is about the organisms it's about cooperation, and if people wake up to that, I think things are becoming much clearer as to, yes, I am me and I don't want to be anybody else, but on the other hand, if you ask yourself what is really you, what makes you, it's just you are a product of all the experiences you ever had, your DNA blueprint, whatever the reason for that is, and all the cosmic waves that come in, all the whatever changes. There are so many layers that make you. So the question is, what's really you? And then if the question is, is there free will? Who breathes? Is it you that breathes, or is it somebody else? Because even if you don't think about breathing, you still breathe. Who is it that breathes for you? So we are going into a topic that is really, really big, and I don't know myself. I'm studying every day in order to shed some light, and I think many much smarter brains than mine have thought about that for years and years, and they have maybe figured out by now, but they're in a different dimension, so they cannot tell us. So I think this is just the beauty of life, just to see what it's about. And maybe you change dimensions or you die or whatever happens, and then you maybe know. And then you will say, okay, was worth it or not. But we don't know.
Yeah. I think, Carla, that Ingolf actually answered it earlier as well. If we work to transform ourselves to something that we're comfortable with and that we like and that we love and that we're happy with, and we're all intertwined, at the molecular level, then when you change and transform, somebody on the other side of the country changes and transforms, because there's an equilibrium of good out there that we can all support each other. So when I'm working in change management, for example, I say we make one change, we step forward and we let the things ripple forward. And then we make another step and we let it ripple forward. And after 10 or 12 steps, you've crossed the room and you've seen the change that you were working towards, but it's all through small steps. And when those ripples go out, we don't necessarily know how they affect the rest of those around us. But that's why we do it one step at a time, because you can change your strategy with each new step. And that, with that said, you take that out into the rest of the world. You make a change, Carla, and there's a lot of ripples that go out, and people around you will shift, and people around them will shift, and so on and so on. So if we change the world, we need to change ourselves. And that's, so we focus on how to change ourselves, and we'll see things happen in the world.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah, we can't overwhelm ourselves by thinking really complexly, what those higher minds do all the time. But in reality, it's simply focusing on how we change to be our higher self.
Well, along with that, these days people are talking about energies, and we're just a body vibrating with different energies. I agree with that. However, if that is true, and the energies are guiding us through life, why can't we begin to vibrate on the same frequency? Or why do we have to have all these different frequencies that go from positive to negative? What is the reasoning for that? And maybe this is another show, but I went there.
it's embracing the dark side. There's a lot of talk in the philosophical world about that. There are negative energies, but if you look at them not as positive and negative in the judgmental way, you'll see that they are part of what makes us three-dimensional. So I've used this before when I was teaching my grandson to draw. You know, I drew a circle, and then I showed him how when you shade the circle just right, the circle becomes a sphere, because you can add three dimensions by adding the shade. So we need the shadow side to help us understand the bright side. And when you look at it in that non-judgmental way, then some of the things that we think are really evil may not be as evil as we have perceived. Now, there are some evil stuff. You know, I will say that, you know, there was something outside of my neighborhood just recently where there was a drive-by shooting of some sort. That's pure evil. I don't like that. I don't want any of that around. However, somebody somewhere had to learn some lesson. And that's, you know, when you take it up to the highest level, you kind of go, okay, how do I change this? Well, for me personally, it's flooding my neighborhood with love, you know, because somebody's hurting somewhere, and we need to surround whoever that is with love, and hopefully they'll find what they need. You know, there's a lot of anger and there's a lot of angst, and we can just throw our hands up and go, I can't handle it all. Or we can say, bring into my sphere love and light and spread it through. And that's what I mean when I change myself, I can change a greater picture. But it took me a while to understand. I mean, it took me years to understand that that's possible, but the only thing I can change is me. You know,
And that's the point.
Yes.
The only thing we can change is ourselves. And even when we go to change ourselves, we don't know where it's going, but it is going in a path that we need to be on. And having said that, we have come to the end of another hour of MindPlore, Jean and Inga. And I am so happy we had this discussion. And with that, we will be back on Tuesday to speak again on MindPlore and explore our minds. Can we wave goodbye?
Bye.
Bye.